Hello and welcome along to the Rugby Pod. Big Jim and Goody are back with us again, and so is Beer 52, guys.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Some happy customers, loyal customers, long-term customers. They're well happy. And if they're happy, we're happy.
And you can still get those 8 free beers. All you got to do is go to beer52.com/rugby. The first case you get of 8 beers will be free. That's beer52.com/rugby. And in doing so, you'll be supporting the pod there as well. How's your week been, boys? Goody, where are you?
I'm just in the East Wing this week. A bit of work going on in the West Wing. So just moved down to the East Wing. So I haven't got my dartboard behind me this week, but it'll be back, don't worry.
Jim, how's your week been, mate?
Oh, great. If you've not been following me all over social media, I've been posting the good life. Rented a dog as well for the weekend. So a dog that basically it's called an Instagram dog, where you hire a dog, take loads of pictures, bang it on social media, get loads of people liking it, and then just let it off the lead and to go and find wherever it wants to go off the back of it. And a few more followers and people loving me as a dog person. Ace too. It's actually, the dog was called Mildred for the millions of people asking. Who calls the dog Mildred?
Oh, mate, I love weird dog names. Mildred's a quality name for a dog. Mildred! Mildred. Just calling her back.
Mildred. Well, we were down the beach with the kids over the weekend, and Mildred actually belongs to my mum. So she brought it up. I mean, only 3 or 4 shits in the Volkswagen transporter van that my stepdad's converted. It looks so chabby, it's beyond belief. He thinks it looks really cool. He's got private number plate on it, P23NNY, because his surname's Penny, get it? So it looks like Penny. Brings the dog up, drives up from Coventry. Yeah, no Coventry homes. Literally falls out the van. The smell of this dog, Mildred, the bulldog. They clean it up and they enter the premises. And as soon as they enter the premises, they get given a couple of kids, aka the twins. So weekend's been good down the beach. Not that hot, I'll be honest, it's Scotland, but nonetheless, a very nice weekend. Thank you very much for asking, Andy Rowe.
It's okay.
I've got some big news though, boys.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, some big news. Turkey Twizzlers are back.
What?
I'm so happy this week because Turkey Twizzlers are back. Have you not seen the big news?
I don't know what they are.
Jim, you've definitely eaten Turkey Twizzlers in your time growing up as a kid. It's the comeback of the century, boys. Everyone knows about Turkey Twizzlers. Jamie Oliver tried to get them banned from school menus and things like that. So they're back in the shops. They're back everywhere. Bernard Matthews, Turkey Twizzlers. I'm salivating right now.
Are they crisps or not?
No, they're like it's Turkey Twizzlers as it says on the box, Jim. It's turkey that's twizzled in a sort of kind of breadcrumb coating.
So it's like sausages or something.
Well, they're Turkey Twizzlers. Like,
Turkey.
It's just turkey, yeah.
Well, they say it's turkey. It's not. It's probably a mixture between Mildred's dad and his sister. all rolled up with a bit of cat as well. And yeah, I tell you what, they might stamp it with a turkey beak, which makes it turkey.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I thought you'd gone through all that. I thought it was a new you, new pod, new year. Pandemic's nearly over. He says, new you.
Yeah, definitely. But Turkey Twizzlers are great. But I've got a bit of a debate I've had with my missus this week, and she thinks it's just me that does this sort of thing. So the kids are in bed, and missus goes in the shower, and I just thought, do you want me to come in the shower with you? And she's like, no, I'm all right, thanks. I'm like, oh, okay. But at this point, I'd already taken my clothes off, right? Thinking opportunity, and then he started. I started being a bit silly, messing around, and you make a few.
What?
Well, you make a few shapes with your nether regions, don't you? That you can, as a bloke, you can.
Oh, the one the tuck throughs.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Well, here we go. So you took them through my legs, and then you're doing other things, trying to make a sandwich with them, and all this stuff. And
a sandwich?
Yeah, you can make a sandwich with it.
How do you make a sandwich?
It's a hot dog, really, isn't it? So the bun is the testicles, and the sausage is the sausage. So I'm doing this. I'm trying to entertain the missus a bit, and she's like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, what do you mean, what's wrong with me? And she's like laughing at me, but out of pity. And she's like, who does that? I said, I guarantee every bloke has done that at some point in their life. So she wants me to put that to the panel, to Jim and Andy Rowe and Tim, but I definitely know Tim does it because he always sits with his pants down. But she thinks I'm weird for doing that. Surely every bloke does that, right? I said it's a women's thing that you don't understand that men can do that. And you just play with your bits a bit, don't you, right?
Well, I've done the vag, that's it. And yeah.
The old tuck between the legs.
Absolutely looks legit, I've been told by a few people.
Who have you been showing that to then?
Everyone. I used to do it all the time. It was like my go-to. It was just like, rather comfortable. But you can do that.
You can
do that. The old shower humour.
Yeah, so
I think Mako used to do it as well, but not intentionally. I'm joking. I'm joking.
So there's my proof. Jim's definitely done it. Andy Rowe, have you?
Sometimes when I'm happy, I'll do a wee helicopter.
Yeah, you see?
Just a wee celebrational helicopter.
Yeah, so hold on a minute. Carolyn, you're wrong. Every bloke does it. You see, I told her.
Yeah, see, she knows. She knows.
She can't hear me. She's out in the garden, so there we go.
But my missus is, she thinks men are weird, but she only really knows me as like a proper man, fart, like cupping your farts and wafting them up and stuff like that. She thinks that that's weird.
In her face or yours?
No, generally in mine. It's, I don't know. Like what, it's a disgusting thing, but it's an honest thing. It's a true thing.
Your own smell quite nice though sometimes.
Yeah, I don't get it. I just don't get what's wrong with men. Like a lot of
the old cupcake.
The old cup and throw. It's like Sam Vesti, pick your nose and eat it. That's more of a man thing. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever seen a woman, not even a girl as a kid, picking their nose and eating it. Boys, men, all the time. There's a few that we know. Chris Ashton, he was a pick your nose and eat it.
Yeah.
Grant Gilchrist as well. We used to call him the bogey monster. Sam Vesti being the glaringly obvious one. I've not been impartial as well. Why waste? Apparently it's good for the immune system. So just to let people know. I mean, I don't know where we're going with it, but
I think it's all good stuff for your autobiographies when they come out eventually. And someone's actually asked on Twitter if we want to get onto the rugby when your autobiographies are coming out. The likes of Marla, Hartley, and Haskell, they're all coming out soon. Have you heard anything about those? Any of those in particular?
Wow, talking of autobiographies, and we'll get onto them. I got sent James Hook's, and it's not an autobiography. I'd say it's more of a novel. Started reading it to JJ, and I haven't read.
I don't think you could read, Jim.
Well, I can't. This is my point that I'm getting to. So, but I'm lucky with James Hook's. There's more of a kind of narrative that I understand, and it's more for the younger generation. But I've started reading that, but no, I haven't read Haskell's or Hartley's. I've listened to Warren Gatland's, but I've been seeing some transcripts. That's the correct terminology. I've been reading and hearing some extracts that they've extracted from the book, which very interesting. Headlines, sensationalists, headlines.
Would you like a couple of quotes? Do you want me to throw a couple at you?
Hit us.
Okay, Dylan Hartley's. Have you heard any of his extracts?
I have.
Read any of his?
Yes.
What did you make of the one where he talked about Eddie Jones ringing him to let him know he wasn't going to the World Cup, saying, "You're fucked, mate"?
Well, I mean, I've been lucky enough to go and watch England train, and we've talked about this a few times, haven't we? And I was gobsmacked at how intense the training was, how long it was, etc., etc. And what you will get from Eddie Jones is, on occasions like that, just honesty. He's just been honest with him, mate. You're fucked. You're absolutely fucked, mate. You're not going to the World Cup. And it was all about his knee. But I've seen the training, and it's brutal, and we've seen the environment, and obviously, and it's like every international team that's ever been before. While that head coach is in charge, as a player, you may moan between yourselves. You may go for the odd Sappuccino. I can imagine being in Scotland when Jim was playing. It was like Sappuccino for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But as players, I suppose the issue is you sometimes with such a strong character like Eddie Jones, and we've talked about it on here before, you can't feel you've got the confidence to go up to him and say, "Hey mate, we need to dial back training a little bit," because actually one of your leaders is Owen Farrell, who probably trains harder than anyone in the world and doesn't have a social life. All he cares about is, "I want to play rugby and I want to win. We're playing touch, we're playing tiddlywinks, whatever it is. I'm going to fucking win."
Teabag.
So it doesn't surprise me anything that's come out. Having seen it and witnessed it, but ultimately Eddie Jones doesn't care what the players think after they're finished. It's all for him about the winning and taking them to a level that he feels is good enough to win the World Cup, which ultimately we didn't do. But he's always said, "I try and make training sessions way harder than games, because then games are easier." And then one of the other quotes is from Dylan Hartley. He says when he got to the weekend, he was absolutely bollocks for a game, and all he wanted to do was win the game, so he had an easier week next week under Eddie Jones. And when you've kind of got a authoritarian coach in Eddie Jones.
Dictatorship.
There you go. Well, let's not get too political, but yeah, I hear you, Jim. And Owen Farrell's the captain. Who's going to go against those two? Because, ultimately, when a player then retires or a player leaves and doesn't get picked again, or the coach leaves, then things come out of the woodwork. And we've always said that things will come out once those changes happen. And, you know, you look at Danny Care. I know for a fact Danny Care had a fairly brutal conversation with Eddie Jones when he was playing for England against Japan, which was his last game back in sort of November 2018, I think it was. And at the time, it was always Ben Youngs and Danny Care. Ben Youngs was the first choice. Danny Care's coming off the bench. And they played against Japan, didn't play very well. Eddie Jones dropped Danny Care for the next game. And off the back of that, Danny Care went to Eddie Jones and said to him, "Hey, Eddie, what's the crack? You know, I want to be able to play in the front line. I want to play with Owen Farrell at 10. I want to play with Billy Vunipola at 8. But my opportunity was with some of the second choice players." He hasn't been seen again. He hasn't played Test match rugby ever again because he questioned Eddie Jones. And, you know, that's Eddie Jones is right as the head coach. You live and die by the sword, don't you? And, you know, the other one was treating players like a piece of meat. And that's effectively what people are.
Well, he also mentioned, Dylan did, and he quoted in saying about the generation of players being crash dummies for sport in transition from semi-professionalism, right? So what he's talking about is that our age, our what's the word?
Demographic?
No, not our demographic.
Generation?
So what he's saying is our generation, our era, Goody, and we're probably the back end of that. Dylan's obviously just come out of that now. I think we are. I think that's exactly what it is. And listening to Eddie Jones last week on a rival podcast, I've actually warmed a little bit to him in terms of how open he's become. But you can tell there's an air of it, and I said it, around the dictatorship that he kind of runs. But ultimately, what he said to Dylan, and as harsh as it is, was he right? He says to him, "You fucked." Was he right or was he wrong?
He was right, yeah. He speaks the truth.
Exactly. And you can't handle the truth, as they said in The Few Good Fellas or whatever it's called. And unfortunately, and this is the thing that people need to get away from in terms of rugby, right? How it used to be. And there is still this rugby family, and there's still the values that are upheld across the board, all right, in rugby. But now the game has gone so professional, right? You only have to have a look at the months gone by, the stuff that we've seen around the salary cap, we've seen around the sevens, like all these different things. Rugby is now at the stage where it's about money, right? I mean, you can't get away from that. And coming to the point where you speak about autobiographies, that I've been approached to, you know, write an autobiography, and so is Goody. I don't feel as I'm at the stage yet where I want to open people up, because that's effectively what you have to do. If you're going to be completely honest, and we do a little bit of it on here, but I've got my own story. Goody's got his own story about different coaches and how you're dealt with. Ultimately, it's a professional game, right? And you can look at it, and I remember being with a player, and I won't mention the club, or maybe mention it in the autobiography, that played at a club for many, many years and was coming towards the end of his career, and turned to the club and said, "Right, what are you going to do for me now? I'm retiring." And the club said, "Well, what do you mean, what are we going to do for you now?" And they're like, "Well, I've been a loyal servant here for many, many years." And they were like, "Yeah, we've paid you probably over £1 million. Like, what do you mean, what are we going to do for you?" And that's what it is. You get paid to play, right? I got paid to play in the back end of my career. Was player welfare fair in terms of the way that I was managed, the way that Dylan was kind of managed? Was that at the forefront? No. You effectively become cannon fodder, right? Because the way that sport works, the way that rugby works, is the next generation is coming through. There's an evolution, the one that can train throughout the week, the one that will say yes, the player that won't be divisive. So you're Danny Care, arguably, off the back of that. So I think it's great that Dylan's flagged that up, because again, I'm just seeing positive stuff about Eddie, but there's two ways you can look at it. There's one way you go down it like an honest line, or you can hide away and say, "Oh, you know, this and this is why we've not picked him." But I actually think Eddie, with the older players, after the World Cup and stuff, dealt with them quite well. You know, he could have come in, and a lot of people didn't want Dylan to play. A lot of people were saying, like, Jamie George is a better player, and well, not arguably, he was. So from Dylan's point of view, and you write a book, you know, a year after you retire, or how many months it's been, there's still a part of you. And that's why, again, I never wrote a book, and why sometimes you're quite careful, because reflection's a good thing, right? You need to look back on, actually, you get a better perspective of things. You get a better view when you completely take the emotion out. I imagine if you're Dylan, there's still a lot of emotion in there, right? Did he retire at the right time? He'll be thinking about the different relationships that he had. He didn't make 100 caps. I'm sure that was a goal for him. Everything that he had to deal with. But That's sport. Unfortunately, that's rugby. You know, there isn't the loyalty that people think. There just isn't. I don't care what anyone says. Show me. Show me where it really is. It's a business at the end of the day, and we've seen that in if the last year doesn't show you that, with everything that's happened at Saracens, with everything that's happened around the salary cap, with everything that's happened now in terms of the amount of games that are having to be condensed, with the Lions tour that's coming up with it, which is going to make a significant amount of money. Is player welfare? Are these things at the front of the mind? No. Eddie Jones is going to get judged on winning games, winning World Cups. If that means that a player's fucked, a player's fucked. And ultimately it's harsh, and I hate it. And I kind of battle myself all the time in terms of my kids playing rugby, and do I want them to make a living off it? How would have I done things differently? You know, why wasn't I treated the same way, you know, Marrow was treated or George was treated at Saracens? I battle these things in my mind, but ultimately it doesn't matter. You know, Dylan's had an amazing career. You know, he's a great ambassador regardless of the past kind of history, that, you know, discrepancies around discipline that he has. He's been a great ambassador, and he had a great innings. So, but I love it. I love the fact that he's come out and he's saying these things, and I'm sure with Haskell's as well, he's going to come out and say a load of things as well.
I think the thing with it as well, when you're talking about it, Jim, is, and everything you're saying is right, but the other way of looking at it is these players who are in that environment, and Dylan was one of them, Dylan was the leader, was he, or did he have the ability at the time to say the things he's saying now? Probably not, because he's thinking to himself, if I air these grievances now, I'm going to get dropped. So there's 25 grand a week gone from each England game. So you make these decisions along your career. You fight the battles that you think you've got the ability to have a decent positive impact on. And other times you put up and shut up. And that's life, isn't it, really? In every job that we do, you have to fight your battles that you think you're going to win when you're trying to create what you feel is, the destiny of a team or whatever. And when you've got a head coach who is someone as mentally strong and as sort of authoritarian as Eddie Jones is, there's little wins you can get, I'm sure. But the big wins, like in every player, you get to the end of a career, some players will look at, and some people will look at Dylan's book now and they'll say, he's saying these things now, it's easy to say it now because he's retired. But it's the right thing for him to do. It's the truth. He's out of that environment. It's not going to affect his selection. It's not going to affect his bank balance on the top of it. And it is brutal saying that. I was in an England camp where I didn't agree. Dave Allred was the kicking coach, who was Johnny Wilkinson's kicking coach, made Johnny what he was, but that worked really well for Johnny Wilkinson. Didn't work for Charlie Hodgson, who's a good mate of mine, and Jim's, and, didn't necessarily work for me. But we played the game in camp and we were sort of sat there and we'd have conversations about it going, I don't know what the fuck he's trying to teach us here. Like, he's saying buzzwords to us and I'm like, I don't know what it means. But in my own mind, I sat there and just thought, I'm just going to nod, because if I question him, does he think I'm not as good as Johnny Wilkinson? Well, of course, we all know I wasn't. But if you question the coach because you don't get it and you don't want to question him too much because that might impact on selection, you just put up and shut up, don't you? And that's the world we live in. Whatever job you do, certain things you can try and change slowly. There's certain things you can change straight away by saying stuff. And there's certain things that with a head coach like Eddie Jones, you ain't ever going to win. And if he believes the intensity of training and the way they need to do things is right to win games at the weekend, he's had a pretty decent record, hasn't he? So that players are treated like pieces of meat, and unfortunately, that's the world we live in.
Well, we'll start dissecting some of the games that happened over the weekend. But first of all, I see that rugby followed in other sports in addressing the issues of racism, and the slogan "Rugby Against Racism" seemed to be one that everyone could get behind. And what did you make of some teams doing different things pre-match, along with there also being splits within the teams as well?
Yeah, it was really interesting to watch it unfold. We knew that something was going to be done. I'm not too sure in terms of heads up what the club's got. From what I'm hearing, it was a little bit last minute. And anyone who watched the games at the weekend would have seen the emotion behind it, but not just the games at the weekend. The last few months of watching everything unfold, and I've been at home with the kids and stuff like that, and watching it all unfold and having discussions with them in-house. So I think it's right, absolutely, that as a sport, and I say that as a sport because that's what we're talking about, but in life as general, that we get behind it. There's absolutely no room for racism. And I know we're all taking a stance on it now. It's been spoken about more publicly, and there's different ways in which you can show that. And I think from what I'm hearing is that Premier Rugby had chats with the club in terms of what they were going to do in terms of showing unity and showing solidarity towards that. And naturally there's going to be questions. And if anyone listened to Ugo for BT Sport, he mentioned about Lou De Jager, for example, from Sale, that he won't be taking a knee, he'll be staying stood. And there was the iconic vision of one of the Dupree brothers having his hand on Marlon Yard's shoulder, and they dealt with it differently. But the more I've kind of learned about the way that the clubs went about it, that it wasn't a universal decision. It was spoken about within the clubs. We saw that Exeter Chiefs all stood up. But I think it's right. I think it's right that as a game that we show our solidarity and unity towards such a difficult subject to talk about sometimes. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And I think that when people are talking about why some players stood and what some players now, then you should probably ask them. But from what I hear about and speaking to some South African friends about it, it was a lot of the South African lads chose, not a lot of them, all the South African lads chose to stay stood, and that's a religious stance for them, that they only kneel for God. So there's a part of it where you're trying to stay united, show solidarity, but there's also respect to each and everyone's kind of views around it. But I think everyone will agree, anyone that I've spoke to, and you've seen how everyone's come together, that there's absolutely no room for racism in sport, but ultimately in life.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the message that was Rugby Against Racism is exactly the right message. Obviously, some people and some clubs were sort of more vocal and more supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement that people have discussed. Some people feel that's been politicised, and also some people feel that has shown some traits of racism or anti-Semitic comments as well along the way. So that's perhaps why not everyone wanted to get behind one specific sort of stand where you say you're taking the knee. And you've got to leave it down to each individual. I think it was perfectly handled. Like Jim says, people are looking at South Africans and saying none of them took the knee, that's because they're racist. And I've seen that on social media, which is absolutely the wrong way of looking at it. And I actually pulled someone up on Twitter about it, saying, how about, instead of just pinpointing that, why don't you say everyone's united in fighting against racism, rugby against racism? And Jim's right, there's no place for it in our society, whether it's rugby, school, in life in general, in the workplace, wherever. But Jim's just made the point there, which not many people have made the point around, that South Africans didn't take a knee because it's a religious stance and they only take it for God. But that then brings in a whole another set of issues for other people that perhaps don't have the same religious beliefs as the South Africans. So where some people said, Premiership rugby should have led from the front and should have said everyone is going to do this. If they're saying everyone take a knee, first and foremost, you're going to have problems because people might not agree with that. They all agree without a shadow of a doubt in Rugby Against Racism. But then if you say, actually, we're all going to stand or we're all going to join arms or create a huddle, then there'll be players that want to take a knee. So you can't appease everyone by making one decision, and ultimately you can't force people to do something they don't want to do. You want it all to be inclusive, and you want everyone's buy-in, because the message is strong. The message is Rugby Against Racism, and every person, every individual should be allowed to portray their feelings on that and support it in a way they want to, and not get forced to do one thing or another. So I think everyone has made the message very clear. I agree that each club could have a discussion, and I know that some players at some clubs took a knee for supporting other players in their team. I also know that some players didn't want to take a knee and ultimately did what they wanted to do around supporting Rugby Against Racism. So I think it's been well handled. I think everyone has got a very clear message now, and there should be no politicising anything, whether people took a knee, whether people didn't take a knee. It's not one size fits all here, except for the fact that the one size fits all is that everyone is behind the fact that rugby is against racism.
And of course, things got started and kicked off at the Stoop on Friday night. How disappointed were you guys with Sale? We thought they were going to run over the top of the teams, didn't we?
With Sale or rugby in general?
Sale.
There was one game was a hell of a game. The rest, we might come to it later, but
yeah. I don't want to be horrible, but you've got to state the facts. I don't want to sit here and say most of the games. I watched most of them at the weekend. It was an amazing watch, but you kind of knew that anyway. You look at Baxter's comments and stuff without the crowds. And the interesting thing for me watching the games, we talk about the Friday night, there was a lot obviously that went on before. There was a lot of emotion in the build-up, and anyone who watched it on TV, watched it on BT Sport, you hear the crowd that's been manufactured and overlaid over the top. I actually thought that the crowd was in the stadium, so that noise is going out over the tannoys. But apparently it's not. Apparently it's deadly silent in there, which I actually would have quite liked to have watched the game in silence to hear all the interactions. Maybe not, because there'd be a lot of swearing, I'm sure. But look, if you look at the game, it was in the lead up to it. Sale, everyone was talking about them. We obviously had Simon Orange on last week, the big signing of Manu Tuolangi, but they just didn't turn up, did they? If we're going to talk frankly about it, Steve Diamond said that it was a long trip down. And it's tough, isn't it? And we spoke about it for you, because you look at the standard of the games. Anyone who watched the Aotearoa tournament down in New Zealand, it took 2 or 3 games to get going, with the amount of penalties and the stuff around the breakdown. And they're not new laws around the breakdown. It's just being made sure that they're refereeing it properly for once. And guys are keen, but look, it's going to take 2 or 3 games to get into the swing of things. To be fair, I actually thought fucking Quins looked really good.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, like I genuinely do, and there's a couple of teams that looked really, really good. Wasps being one, and we'll come
Hey, he's a fan.
Mate, I always said top 4, mate. Always said. But Quins as well, mate. Do you know what I mean? Quins looked bloody good. Marcus Smith looked great at 10. So, I mean, that's a big win for them. And again, look, after looking at the game, and everyone was talking about Sale, top 4, but a real good chance of winning it. And again, you look at the league table where it stands now, you've got a load of teams in that mixer, and it's the teams that now get up to speed quickly, because, like I said, it's going to take 2 or 3 games to get up to speed, but you need a bit of momentum behind you, don't you? It's always going to be tough. If you're on the road and you're travelling, you're not allowed to stay in the hotels and whatever the situations are around that logistically, it's going to be tough to get going. But for Sale, you'd be pretty pissed off, wouldn't you? Because you've made a load of noise around it. You've got some amazing signs. You've got Fafterkler, you've got Lou Diego playing, Manu Tuolangi you've signed, blah, 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 blah. But again, you've got to give all credit to Quins. I knew they'd come through. I knew it.
Oh, Jim, you're not a turncoat at all, are you? But yeah, listen, Steve Diamond said they didn't get off the bus. There's big expectations, big noises around them. And I'm sure, that their game will be up this weekend. They play Exeter at home. It will just be like a normal game for Sale, to be honest, with no fans in the stadium.
Got no fans.
You've got no fans. But ultimately, he'll be disappointed, and, they'll have a pretty tough training week. Dimes will be given some pretty stern home truths, but they'll bounce back. They've got a quality squad there. And the battle every week is going to be topsy-turvy, getting into this top 4. Also pushing for top 6 qualification for next year's Champions Cup. It's Quins are in the mix. Let's not beat around the bush. Guzzi has said he's got players back fit. Mike Brown's back fit. He was injured for huge parts of the earlier segment of the season. There's other guys in that Quins team that have come back. Landajo played 9, played unbelievably well, got man of the match. Danny Care's injured. So they have got the makings of a decent squad at Quins and the ability to perhaps push towards top 4. They do go to their nemesis, or Saracens' nemesis. I can't work out which way it goes this weekend in Saracens. And, the Sharks have got to play Exeter at home. So every week there's going to be big talking points around which team's made a move. And Sale they've got a losing bonus point, so it's not all doom and gloom. But, they didn't fire any shots. And as Dime said, they were still on the bus come kick-off time.
Exeter still look like the team to beat, don't they?
Yeah, and there's a different pressure on Exeter now, I think. I think everyone's expectation, and obviously by looking at the league table, Exeter will finish more than likely first, worst case scenario, second for me. So they're going to finish first. They're going to get a home semi-final, which by then we may have crowds. Everyone knows how difficult it is to go and win at Sandy Park in a knockout game. Their challenge, and I wrote a column for Rugby Pass on it last week, their challenge is a mental challenge around winning the final. They've been to the last 4 finals. They got dusted by Saracens on 3 of those occasions. They beat Wasps in a game they should have lost. But, they squeak over in the last minute of extra time to win it. So it's a hurdle for them, because it's always been Saracens as the favourites to win the final. But everyone kind of wants Exeter to win it if you're not a Saracens fan. This year, there's an expectation that it is Exeter's to lose. So it's a different mental process. And they'll just keep going about their business in the league. They'll finish in the top 2. If I had a mortgage, I'd put it on the fact that they'll be in the final. Whether they win it or not is another question. But they do look good. Hoggy's hair,
on point.
Wow. And you look at it. Everyone talks about Exeter as this pick and goo team, the driving maul. They're very good when they get into the 22. take their opportunities. But first phase try that they scored was lovely. Hoggy gets around the outside, intricate little play. No one's talking about that. No one's talking about the fact that George Ford, stayed on the defender he shouldn't have stayed on because he didn't want to make a tackle. But let's not go there, Jim.
But I actually thought George Ford played really well.
He did play really well, but he's a liability in defence.
Mate, okay. But mate, look, if we're talking about George Ford and Leicester, I was pumped to see Leicester turn up the way that they did. You know what I mean? They were never going to win that game. Like, you look at the two sides, the quality, how settled Exeter are. They're at home at Sandy Park. But I was well impressed with Leicester. The physicality, the energy that they showed, the way that they defended the maul at times. I know that they switched off a couple of times for a couple of tries, and about 3 of them got sicked on by COVID. Cowan-Dickey, can you even say that? I don't even know. Oh my goodness.
I'll puke Cowan-Dickey.
Mate, I tell you what, mate. Hey, just run on there with a mask, mate. Make sure that everyone else is protected. But anyway, mate, Leicester's got a place in mine and Goody's heart. They've had a load of changes, some big noises coming out of there with Borthwick. But for the first time, and everything you're hearing about Leicester is that they want to go back to type, right? So they want to go back to the scrum. They want to go back to them all. These things that are in their identity, in their DNA. And you actually look at the squad and you're like, well, can they really do that? Well, I tell you what, against the best in the league, I thought they did. I thought they looked really physical at times, got a few turnovers at more time. Their scrum looked good. So
the issue they did have, though, was a classic Jim Hamilton issue, wasn't it?
Pens, man.
Pens, yeah. They gave 16 on the spin, 16 penalties on the spin away at one point. So, and that kills them, And it's going back to getting used to the new interpretations of how the same laws are being refereed by the referees. Look at Dan Cole. There's one with Dan Cole where he's flopped over to win a penalty for holding on. And Barnsley did a little piece on it yesterday, didn't he? On BT Sport. 5 years ago, that might have been a penalty. He's not supporting his body weight. It's clear and obvious for the referees, and players have just got to adapt. But Jim's right. It's great to see a bit of gnarly attitude around a Leicester team. The squad, again, and for reasons around finances, doesn't look like a top 4 squad still. There are some star quality players in it, but they are trying to promote youth and push through some of the youngsters. So it's not just the here and now. It's hopefully building under Borthwick for quite a few years. So some positive some positive noises from Leicester, but ultimately top table at the minute is Exeter Chiefs. And the one thing I did like, though, and I taught Coley this a few years back. Back in my heyday, I say heyday, it was the end of my career when I was playing for Wasps. We're playing against Leicester, and Coley had given a penalty away, and I just tried to help him off the floor by pulling his shirt up and revealing his belly. He's obviously taught Ellis Gench to do that because he did it to Johnny Gray. I didn't realise Johnny Gray had a little muffin top, Jim.
Yeah, likes the carbs apparently. Well, not apparently. Mate,
what a ledge.
Clearly does, mate. I know. Exactly. So I did have a chuckle at that. Mate, characters, eh?
Yeah.
Characters.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why Cowan-Dickey was sick. Was that before or after? I think it was after. I think he saw that Johnny touched him and he was...
Yeah.
COVID, you can't say it.
Yeah, he got a bit excited and his breakfast, lunch and dinner came up from the night before.
He was good though, Cowan.
Imagine being sicked on in a game by accident.
My goodness, mate. Well, especially now, especially today's day and age. That's what I mean.
Oh.
Well, if we can't joke about it, we'd cry, wouldn't we? But I mean, you talk about everything that's in place, and you've got someone being sick on another player. Literally. I mean, it was a sick try, though.
Well, we'll get into some more rugby in a minute, but it's time for Jim's favourite feature. Jim, you teased us last week with a big development. This week, what is it? What's going on, mate?
Well, I don't know what the development is. I'm waiting. Goody's going to do the big reveal, the big revel. But yeah, this is my segment. I love it. I'm not very good at it. I'm arguably great at it. Riddle me this, guys. Riddle me that. Jim will solve it. Hit me. Who is it? Is someone coming on?
I teased you last week, didn't I? We felt we needed some help. We felt we needed you to have a bit of brain power along the way. And what better person, what better woman to have on than friend of the show, Carol Vorderman. Wow. She's going to be reading your riddles, Jim. She might even help you out with a few. They might even become a little bit mathematic as well along the way to challenge Mrs. Good. So, great news. We've got Carol Vorderman coming on to talk through your riddle, Jim.
Mate, I tell you, hey, if I wasn't under pressure before in my own household, I'm under pressure now. Thank you.
Okay, you're listening. You're listening, okay.
I am.
Here's the riddle. Riddle number 1. What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years?
Oh, Jim.
Can you just redo it, please?
Okay. What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years?
I feel I'm actually sweating now. I feel under pressure, Carol, with you here.
You got to think outside the box with this one, Jim.
It's because he's got 3 hoodies on. That's why he's sweating. Go on.
So what comes once in a minute,
Yeah.
twice in a
Twice in a
moment,
moment,
but
never in 1,000 years.
chocolate?
Explain it.
How?
Just talk us through your thought process with that one, Jim.
That one, Jim.
What comes in a minute?
What comes once in a minute?
Once in a minute.
I feel it in such under pressure now. It's ridiculous.
How does chocolate work for that one? Can we
There was a chocolate called Minute, wasn't there? Minute chocolate?
Was there? Or maybe
Was
that
there?
was minute.
Minute, Jim.
Was it minute
That's
chocolate? Never mind.
Minute chocolate,
Hey,
yeah.
look at the sweat on your face.
Yeah, the
genuinely, I feel under pressure.
This is more pressure than he's ever been under, Carol, because of your influence here.
Yeah.
You've gone pale.
This is the hardest one. This is the hardest one
This is
ever.
the easy one.
Right, Jim, have a look at the words. I'll give you a hint. Have a look at the words.
So let me just read it again. What comes once in a minute?
Yeah.
What do you mean once? What comes once in a minute?
Yeah. Should I give you a clue?
Yes, please.
Jim's about 5 seconds normally, but there we go.
Okay.
Boom.
So,
Oh,
when
here
I
it
was on
is.
Countdown, I did the numbers game and I did the letters game.
Yeah.
Oh,
What comes once in a minute, twice in a moment, but never in 1,000 years?
Consonant.
Yeah,
You're in
it is a consonant, but which consonant?
Oh, okay,
yes,
okay.
yes.
So consonant, Carol.
I thought you said you're
no,
incontinent then, Jim. I thought you said you're incontinent.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I might be. I might be. I'm struggling. I'll be honest. What comes once in a
Okay,
minute?
so consonant,
Twice.
once in a minute, twice in a moment,
A-E-I-O-U. What's that called? What's that
that's
again?
a vowel.
A vowel. I was going to say noun. That's a noun.
Carol, you see what I have to deal with here every week.
Never in 1,000 years. So minute. So what
Consonants
comes-
are all the letters that aren't vowels.
M-I-N-U-T-E. So,
Yeah.
So what
Twice
comes
in a
once minute?
moment.
Got it.
What?
Go on, Jim.
It's a letter.
Oh, hold on, we're getting there.
Letter.
It's a consonant.
It's a consonant.
Yes.
Not a continent. No, it's not a continent.
What comes once in a
Moment.
moment.
Got it.
Go on,
Got it.
Jim.
It's a letter M.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey,
There
it
we
takes
go.
time. Under pressure, Carol. I'm under pressure and I've just nailed it. So, yeah. Would you say that?
Nailed it.
Genuinely, the millions of listeners out there will not see. They might be able to feel the sweat and the pressure,
Yeah, I
but
can see the sweat. I can
Yeah.
see the sweat. I can feel
Yeah.
the tension.
exactly. Well, I mean, I'm good at the, if you call the letters and the vowels and the consonants and all
Yeah,
that.
I could tell
I'm good
that.
at that. I'm good at
Yeah.
that ones.
You're
But these
good at those-
riddles, I'm under pressure. So
Those two
Yeah.
letter words you'd get, wouldn't you, Jim? Well, thank you for joining us from your bed, Carol Vorderman.
That was my pleasure.
that's the most under pressure I've felt, I think.
Wow.
When I'm over ball in the final against Exeter, wondering whether this is the biggest moment of my life, whether or not it's going to be a penalty or not. But the funniest thing about it is what's thrown me is Goody's voice has changed when she's
Hey.
come on.
Oh, really?
Hello, Carol.
That's my polite voice, James.
Hello. Completely thrown me.
Yeah, it's probably true. That's my
Completely
polite
thrown
voice.
me.
It's my business voice, my polite voice. Sweating now, Jim. You were sweating, weren't you? Then?
Mate, genuinely, I'm still sweating now. It's more a case of no. I used to watch Countdown when I was younger.
Down,
Down, down, down,
down, down, down, down, down, down.
But anyway,
yeah.
Anyway, I need to finish off the segment. We probably should have got Carol to do it, but it might not have worked in her Welsh accent. So, Carol, thank you for coming on. Riddle me this, Carol. Riddle me that. I'll say it. You don't say it.
We've got another treat for you now because the Guinness PRO14 gets underway again this weekend. So we've got friend of the show, Ulster and Ireland legend John Cooney is on the line. How are you, mate?
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back.
As we did the cheer, as we brought you onto the show to the millions of people, so the Cooney and basically the Rooney, but the Cooney, which Rooney's has been now. Tell me, do you like the Cooney chat? You must do.
I have to be honest, I do, and it'll be a little bit different now without the crowd this weekend playing. A few lads have made a couple of jokes that they're recording and pre-recording it so that they can play it if I get any of my kicks. So
there we go.
What happens whether I can perform.
Me and Jim can certainly do that for you. We'll do one now if you want. Should we do it, Jim?
Go on then.
Ready? Cooney! 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 Oh, mate, it's brilliant to have you on. How have you managed with lockdown? I know you've just sort of come back from training and a bit of a COVID test as well, haven't you? How have things been for you over in Belfast?
Yeah, it was interesting we just got tested there to make sure we can go ahead with playing this week. And it's a weird feeling going up your nose that it tickles. Like it's a bizarre feeling, but yeah, it's good to be back to some sort of normality. It took how many months, whatever. I found it pretty difficult at the start. It was nice to have a couple of weeks off, but for once probably in my whole career, I actually felt physically nearly perfect, where I didn't have any like niggles, which is rare for a rugby player. So it was actually probably bad timing, where I came out of actually COVID with a bit of a niggle, which I've gotten rid of now. But it was pretty typical that I go in feeling well and came out feeling bad. I think I kind of overdid it with a bit of training in my garage, a bit too many keepy uppies, where I was kicking the back of my ankle and calf a little bit too much. But yeah, it's good to be back around other players, and like I said, having something on the horizon now, playing a game after watching all the Premiership games last week. It's kind of nice now, something to look forward to.
We're talking about looking forward to stuff. You're going to be our new, poor Katie, but you're going to be our new Celtic correspondent. How does that feel?
Amazing. I need to text Katie and say hard luck.
It was Jim's decision. I'll put it out there.
Poor lad. Once he retires, everything gets taken from him. Now, that's why I opened up the 2 donut shops, I think, so we can get a bit more publicity and stuff behind that.
Do you know what he said to me, the poor lad? He's been messaging me about he's obviously losing his hair. And I'm saying obviously because anyone who's seen him over the last kind of few months would have seen that that's the case. He's been messaging me about either a hair transplant or trying to get involved in Sun. So what we've said is to kind of boost up the ratings visually, aesthetically for the podcast, we brought on the man with the best hair in the game, which is yourself. So he kind of understands the situation, to be honest.
It's a bit of a double whammy, isn't it? Double kicking the balls.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
If he needs a hair transplant, there's only one place to come. Look how good mine looks now, John.
Beautiful. You're like a young Stuart Hogg.
He's absolutely hanging as a bloke. So, good stuff. So, over the last one,
great though. Barnett was brilliant on the weekend.
Yeah, it was good.
Brilliant.
It was good. So, over the last 5 months, then you've been training. You say in your garage. You know, you've probably got a big triple garage because you're the legend of Ulster. How hard was it to train on your own? And how good is it to be back in with the boys and having a bit of banter along the way and telling Billy Burns how hanging he is too?
He's somebody who needs a gym in his garage that long. I've always liked training on my own because it's probably to do with that vanity aspect of it. I like to go and do my cheeky curls all the time, stuff like that. So
tops off.
Yeah, I won't admit anything that goes on that garage. I have all the windows tinted so no one can see it. But yeah, I've always enjoyed doing my own bit of gym. So I found it easy the first few weeks because I knew it was summertime and stuff like that and I wanted to look good. But it got to about 2 months in that when it looked like there's no games coming, that I did find it a little bit difficult to find encouragement. And that's probably why I kind of went off on a bit of a wild one. I was practicing football trick shots and kicking football more than I was a rugby ball. And even NFL went down a rabbit hole of NFL kicking and stuff like that. So I think for me to be stimulated, I need kind of different things every now and again. So it's kind of nice to park rugby for a couple of weeks and just do that own bit of training or looking up different types of things I could do. So yeah, I think understanding myself and doing different things kind of helped me.
And you mentioned your missus earlier. Did she get involved at all with any of the training, or was it she was sending you out the house going, John, just get out, do some training and come back when you've got a decent headspace again?
Because we live right beside a golf course. So for the first couple of weeks, I was kicking into the golf course trees. And I was also running up and down all the different holes. So it was a bit weird for the groundskeepers coming out and seeing me kicking rugby balls and smashing all the trees. So I don't think they're too happy. But in fairness, she tried the first few weeks to do a bit of training with me, but she's a bit hot-headed. She wasn't really enjoying it when I was telling her to try and keep up with me. So And I think she's better off doing her own bit of training. She signed up to some English fitness instructor, so she does her own gym in there for an hour every day. So whatever keeps her happy.
Mate, everyone's an instructor these days, aren't they? You've got yoga online everywhere, mate. Everyone thinks. I mean, I was thinking about it myself. But anyway.
I don't
I know. Yeah, I'm sure you do. He's got a bike. I don't know if you know he's got a bike now. It's almost bent in half, but we should say that. But John, what we should talk about is, I don't know, I mean, you obviously watch the rugby, and I'm sure you watch the news and seen how everything's unfolding across the world when it comes to rugby. There's been a few problems, right, in the Prem, a load of stuff around salary reductions. The Sevens has been disbanded and blah, blah, blah. There's a load of other stuff happening. How have the Irish Rugby Football Union dealt with everything around COVID? I haven't heard too much. It's been quite quiet. But how have they dealt with contracts, with welfare, all them things that have been questioned in the Premiership? I'm right in saying that, Goody. I know. I'm sure you said they've been questioned, right? But how have Ireland Rugby dealt with it all with you players? Yeah, in fairness to them, they dealt really well. I think the way it's worked out for us is probably one of the best nations in the world at the moment in terms of wages and cuts and stuff like that. So when you look around at what was happening in England, we were pretty lucky, I think, because even one of my best mates, Noel Reid, ended up leaving Leicester and going to France. So I was talking to him a lot around that, and it was quite difficult with contracts, and you're even seeing players signing on and haven't even played one game for their club yet. So I haven't heard of anyone around here leaving, even though I made the gag myself that while I was out with an injury that I was off to France because I'm not signing the contract. But no, it's all worked out pretty well. Nobody's leaving, I don't think. So I think we took our time in dealing with it, and the IRFU didn't put us under too much pressure. And they also have a lot of money owning the Aviva and stuff like that. So I think they had a lot of resources they could use. Yeah, they have. And how's Dan McFarland been? Because we've spoken to Katie before, we spoke to Billy Burns about what he's like as a guy, his psychology, the way that he deals with the players. Everything I've heard is extremely positive from when he was in Scotland as well. I'm sure that he's probably been a big help to the players individually, collectively during this time. How has he been? Has he given you guys anything to kind of work on? Has he had any different kind of training methods that you could do? Because look, ultimately, during lockdown, and we've joked about it, and we're not playing anymore, so it is quite different for us. But as young athletes, right, you're in your prime, you're almost not blinded to everything that's going on outside, but you're only thinking about playing rugby, right? Because that's what you do. So there's a big psychological element to that, especially, someone like yourself who's playing in the Six Nations, and it stops. There's a few players like that, I'm sure. But what's Dan been like about managing players like yourself and the rest of the team? Yeah, he's like you said, his background in psychology makes him that a little bit easier to talk to, and it's probably his greatest skills, communication. And we probably all like coaches where you're scared to even speak to them or say how you feel. So he was very connected. He set up a WhatsApp group called Quarantine pretty early in this, so that we could all stay connected. And kind of on a Friday of each week after we did all our fitness or whatever, we'd all put in a picture of what we did in that hour, whether it was ended up always being a beer or a whiskey. So it was good to stay connected that way, and it probably escalated the rest of that evening. But we all stayed in touch, and he'd probably check in every couple of weeks to see how you're feeling. Because for me and people who had people living with them, it wasn't too bad. But you think about the couple of fellas who are single or live on their own, it can be quite difficult, especially if their family lives a couple of hours away. So I'm pretty sure he went out of his way to make sure all those lads felt good, which for a coach to do, it kind of makes you feel way more comfortable in the squad and in the environment.
Mate, you're talking to two guys that have got twins, so we'd have loved a couple of hours just on our own at some point over lockdown, I'm sure. But one of the questions I want to ask you then, you mentioned about you had to send pictures in of what you did. Obviously a beer or a whiskey, whatever. But you also mentioned about the training. How do they actually keep up with the training that you were doing, heart rate monitors and stuff like that? Because what I used to do when I was playing, I'd stick the heart rate monitor around the dog and take the dog for a walk and tell her to run. And that was what I then sent into the fitness coach. And I got away with it for about 3 weeks, and then they realised I was taking the piss. But how did they manage you lot?
Yeah, they had to be careful because the whole ruling around working. So you weren't allowed work technically. So they had to kind of leave us be to decide what we want to do and try and stay on top of it ourselves, which, like I said earlier, it's kind of nice to do your own thing. And for that, GPS is, I'm pretty sure my laptop was too old, it was too crap anyway, so I couldn't really use my GPS. So it was a bit like yourself. I was going and doing my skill, or trying to do fitness. I ended up doing stupid Rabona trick shots against crossbars and stuff like that. So when I was meant to be doing probably 100-meter sprints, I ended up spending an hour and a half one day doing skills, and on the back of it, I'm pretty sure I hurt myself because I was just there for like 3 hours doing nothing really. So yeah, they had to kind of wait till the rules around that when we're back kind of actually working is when we kind of got given programs, and that's when you could start having meetings again and stuff like that. So it kind of took a couple of months where we couldn't really do it properly because that ruling around pay and not being actually in a working environment.
Did you guys have to be quite careful with how you trained during lockdown and during quarantine? Because I know the media was kind of watching you guys quite closely, weren't they, to make sure that you weren't training together and things like that?
Yeah, they ran a story where they got 2 brothers and Marty, I think. So technically it was fine, and they put up a story, and I'm pretty sure the guy who wrote it made a tenner. That's all he made for that.
Is that it?
A tenner.
Mate, I'd have written it for a £5 myself, to be honest.
Why even bother?
And tell me now, obviously Ian Madigan's joined. He's a friend of the show. He came on and talked pretty open and honestly to us about 18 months ago. How's he settled in there? I know we mentioned Billy Burns earlier. Obviously some decent competition there now as well. Yeah,
I'm a bit intimidated with Mads Barnett, and
it's good, isn't it?
His aura as well. He's a good looking bloke. So he looks a bit like yourself, Cooney, actually. Kind of hair.
Oh mate, don't do him a disservice like this. The hair maybe, but not from the eyebrows down.
I tell you about Mads as well, Cooney. Before you jump on it, the way that he handled himself at Bristol, right, and the situation that he found himself in there, and the way that he's spoken about it after, I think that speaks volumes for the guy. Because if I was him, I'd be absolutely raging at the situation. Get brought into a team, whether or not he's marquee player or highly paid, whatever, it's neither here nor there in the grand scheme of things. And the poor bloke doesn't play at all. Do you know what I mean? You think you're going somewhere, you're going to be the lead man, you're going to be in the lead and all that. So, I mean, just following on, probably you're going to talk about it. He's good looking, he's rich, his Barnett's on point. You're going to tell me something bad, though, that he's come back and he's miserable as sin, aren't you?
No, he's in the best shape of his life. He keeps talking about it, that he feels even better than he did around 26 years old. So I played with him since I was probably like 17, 16. So we know each other well, and he's got that swag. So I think he'll fit in pretty well at the moment. He's been training really well. So it'll be interesting now to see with the strength and depth we have at halfback, with Billy going so well, and then Bill Johnson as well. It just gives that strength and depth that we need to kind of compete for championships. And that's something Dan says, especially with Albie Matheson coming in, that we need these players, that if we want to compete each week now with 12, 13 games in a row, we need this squad.
No, absolutely, mate. And we're talking about that and getting onto the game. I think you got Connor at the weekend at the Aviva. You probably would have watched the Premiership games at the weekend, the Championship down in New Zealand. It's taken a while for them to get going, right? The Premiership games at the weekend weren't great. There was a lot of stuff around the breakdown. How difficult, firstly, is it going to be as a player? You think you play at the Kingspan in front of the amazing support there. You're playing for Ireland in sellout stadiums, and now you're going into competitive games with no fans there, right? So firstly, you're going to have to deal with that. Has that been spoken about, how you manage that? And because we've been players before, but there's no fans there. It's more difficult, I would say, to get up for a game. It's like a training game. Have you spoken about that, having watched the games at the weekend or anything around that?
Yeah, we actually had a training game on Saturday because the game's Sunday. So we talked about it after, that it was that type of atmosphere that we trained in, that we're going to have to be ready for a game. And for me personally, and Goody would know as a kicker, you practice your kicking in that environment all the time. So I don't see that aspect of the game being any different. If anything, it might be even that little bit easier, because sometimes when it does go really quiet in a full stadium, it's a little bit more difficult to concentrate. So I think on that aspect of it will be a little bit easier. But yeah, we talked about it last year, or maybe a year and a half ago, when we were struggling away form, and we beat Scarlets away in Europe, and one of our best performances. But the week before that, we had driven a new mantra that we bring our own atmosphere away, and we create our own atmosphere. So I assume that this week we'll really drive that again down in the Viva, that it's about creating our own atmosphere away from home, because essentially that's what it's going to feel like with no crowd. So I can only assume. I got kicked out of the leadership group, so I don't really know what the plan is. So I'm just kind of on the outskirts of everything. We did our team photo, and I was the bin juice on the far right. So I don't know, am I going to get booked in, or what's going on here?
What's happening there? How does the star man, the Scrum-Half, get kicked out of the leadership group? What have you done?
No, I'm not. I just didn't get voted. I don't know. Am I so rogue these days that they just leave me be and just let him do what he wants? But I wasn't kicked. I just didn't get voted in again. So maybe I was.
Oh, it was the player. It was the players. Maybe it's a bit of jealousy about the hairdo and the fact that you're our star man in the rugby pod now. So
got a lot of abuse though for the team photo. I was the furthest to the right in the second row. So I don't know. I don't know what the message they're trying to tell me is.
Obviously, let's talk international rugby as well. There's the 8 Nations tournament coming up in the autumn, and ultimately the end of the 6 Nations with the 2 games that Ireland have got. Have you heard from Andy Farrell at all? Has he been in contact? I know obviously a lot of the players are centrally contracted, or all of them are centrally contracted. How's that been over lockdown?
Yeah, he actually texted me just saying he's enjoyed some of my trick shot videos. I think he's a big Man City football fan, so it was kind of lighthearted, just saying he hoped I'm doing well. And I think I was away just up the coast for a few days, so he just said to enjoy it. And my cat actually texted me the other day as well, so I'm due to call him back just for a chat, just to talk about getting back underway and kind of the plan going forward. So it will be nice now to get back to those games, because it's pretty disappointing that they got cancelled, because I was hoping to get a couple of games, and it's typical that just as I was hoping to break into the team, this happened. But all I can do is kind of play well now again when we get back. Well,
we started the bandwagon last year. Cooney should be starting for Ireland. How's it been working with Mike Catt? Because I know Catty reasonably well. Played with him. Obviously, he's coached a bit of me for England as well. He's such a rugby brain, isn't he? Do you enjoy working with him?
Yeah, and another good thing about him is how good of a communicator he is, and just a great bloke. So he's the type of guy, when you see he's smiling all the time, he's asking how you are, which again, for me, it's always been the kind of coach that I've migrated towards, and just somebody who makes you feel more comfortable. And that's how I generally play better, is when I can talk to somebody, I can bounce ideas, and when he tells me I have to do something, I'm going to do it, because I feel bad if I don't. So it's been great having him there, and he's kind of simplified some of our attack, just to kind of attack what we see rather than just going through the set phases or plays that we have. And he's very good at getting that, where we're attacking the space, and similar to the kind of the way England play is these days that most defences know how to defend set plays. It's who can get into the 4th, 5th phase and kind of manipulate the space and play what they see in front, and which again is something that kind of suits me as a player.
Yeah, when you see him again, tell him he still owes me £500 from the Australia tour 2006 from the card school. I haven't forgotten and never will. But he's doing well as a coach, isn't he?
Yeah, he said he's just moved over to Dublin as well. So I called him earlier, and he was just, I think, moving into his new house. So I'd say he's a busy man trying to get that sorted this time of year now.
Yeah, he'll be loving it, I'm sure. Sticking on the Ireland thing, and look, we've been chomping at you to get you a starting place in the team, and I know that Andy Farrell listens. I know that Joe Smith was an avid listener as well, and the Lions tour's coming up, and we're going to be pushing you for that on here, so you can do that for yourself as well. But jokes aside, there's been a healthy competition there with Conor Murray, and I'm sure people read the media, right? And we know what it's like. You maybe don't, as a young fella coming through, that the next player coming through, everyone wants a piece of, right? And he should be starting. Conor Murray's not the same player. He's old. Johnny Sexton the same, and the kind, it goes on that way. How's your relationship been with Conor Murray? Because look, he's one of the best scrum halves to have ever played the game, but you're chomping on his heels. The media is pushing you in some aspects to start ahead of him. How's that relationship been? Because again, having been in, Scotland, for example, with Johnny Gray coming through, you want to give him a little bit of information. You don't give him too much, do you? Because you want to keep your position. But healthy relationship with him, or is it you're vying for that 9 shirt and you want it bad?
Yeah, again, there's not actually that much of a difference. I think it's only a year difference, probably because I have an 18-year-old's haircut that people think I'm a little bit younger.
You better
look. He's got grey hairs. He's got grey hairs. There's only one year's difference.
That's the thing. I think those couple of years injured kind of helped me. I didn't get a battered and bruised for a couple of years, so my body feels really good. But yeah, we played a little bit together underage. I think I played a year young with him, Irish 20s, threw the ball over Ian Madigan's head, got dropped from the 20s. So we know each other quite well.
Mads is short though, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he's 5'8" or something.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, as you find normally with people in your position, you generally get on quite well. I get on with most scrum halves that I play with Ireland or even with Ulster. So because you're working together all the time, you generally bounce each other off ideas and you're practicing together. And he is a good bloke. He's a real good bloke, Conor. So anytime, I think it was the year before, and 6 Nations, I played 4 games and got dropped out of nowhere for the Welsh game. After driving my car to the airport thinking I'd be in the squad to then get dropped. And he came up to me and said a couple of words saying, I'm sorry to see that, and I thought you should have got a game. So it's nice for somebody in your position to kind of have the ability to see that and kind of speak to you and be humble enough to do that. So I've enjoyed his company, and we're two different players. I don't think he's chasing me, and I don't think I'm chasing him. It's just trying to be the best player we can be.
Yeah, good stuff. It's great to hear that everyone still gets on, even though you are competing. But ultimately, the end goal, the big prize at the end of the season, you're starting rugby again this weekend. You fast forward just under a year's time, and it's the Lions Tour to South Africa that's still going on at the minute. Is that a goal for you? Because we're going to start a campaign on the Rugby Pod, Cooney for the Lions. And ultimately, we want to jump on your coattails and get out to the Lions Tour as well. And if you're there and we're there, it'll be some trip. Is it something that you've thought about, or is it just so far off that you just head down playing for Ulster?
Yeah, well, I'd be lying if I'd said it wasn't something I've thought about. It was something that kind of kept me training during this, because it was easy to kind of knock off, like I said. But when you've such a big goal, it makes it quite easy then to work hard. And I said recently in an interview, about 5 or 6 years ago, I sat down, I tried to make a 5-year goal, and I picked the most ridiculous thing that I could think about at the time, and it was to play for the Lions. I remember writing it down and be like, this is stupid to even consider this, because at the time I wasn't even in the Connacht team. I think I was out with my 3rd shoulder surgery, hadn't been capped for Ireland, and I just played Germany, I'm pretty sure, for the Connacht Eagles. So I was a million miles away from being anywhere near that.
The Germans are good though, yeah?
Oh, that was the low point of my career, I think, because Connacht were playing European Cup, and here was me. I just remember thinking, Jesus, your career isn't going very well at the moment. But yeah, I wrote it down anyway, and if I was to obviously hit that, it would be one of those weird moments in your life where you write something down and eventually you hit it. So everything else has kind of come true. Getting the cap for Ireland was kind of the main one at that time. So it would be pretty amazing for that to come true. But I have a lot of work to do. My mantra was always just each game is, I know it's completely cliche, but for 2-3 years, I was not getting selected at all for Ireland, and it was heartbreaking and it was disappointing. But my sister told me all I have to do is keep knocking on the door, and eventually they can't say no. And that's kind of what I've done for the last 2.5 years. So that's kind of what I'm going to plan on doing this season again.
Mate, you have. And the thing that I like most about you, apart from your hair and your ability and all these things that we kind of joke about that we do, that we do genuinely like, and the millions out there as well. But I actually quite like the fact that you're outspoken about them things, because and hence why we want to have you on the show more. Is there a part of you that feels like you're making up for lost time? To be fair, and it's probably more research that I should have done, I didn't realise there was a year's difference between you and Colin Murray, right? So you look at his career, the amount of caps that he's had, the successes that he's had at Munster, the Lions tours, and I think naturally, you want to go, of course. So is there a part of you where you're trying to make up for a bit of lost time? And you've got to put yourself out there. You look at some of the best players in other team sports, they're confident, right? They're putting themselves out. They say, yeah, I want to go on the Lions tour. I deserve to be there. I'm going to push you all the way. So is that something that you consciously do, or that's kind of in you think?
I think it's a bit of both, but even you kind of get bored of hearing the same interviews from rugby players all the time, and they just sit in the fence and they say exactly what you want to hear. And I like to study other people, and I just realized that the more I kind of put myself out there, the more pressure I put myself under to kind of achieve what I want to achieve. And like that, I just seen too many interviews where it's like, yeah, well, hopefully this weekend we go well and we compete. It's just the same stuff over and over again. You might as well just say what you actually feel and what you want to think.
Right, John, well, thank you very much for coming on the show. We'll let you go and shave your face off and get ready for the weekend, mate.
Well, you'll see me Sunday.
Certainly will.
Can't
Good
wait.
man. Thanks, John. The campaign, Cooney for the Lions, starts here.
We're going
Cooney.
Thanks, lads.
Top bloke.
Top lad.
Cooney for the Lions, eh? We're on that.
Yeah, I tell you what, we shouldn't joke, because it could happen. We're that influential.
It's not a joke, mate. See how I'm talking about us, how we're influential. It's got nothing to do with him. We'll get him on. Again, what a lovely bloke. And poor KV. But, mate, you lose your hair. Apparently he's launching another podcast as well, so he's going off on his own. He's going down his other path. He's going left or he's going right forward, I don't know. But we've got the man of the moment. We've got one of my favourite players. Goody speaking for you as well, one of your favourite players in a great club. Mate, I really enjoyed his company there. I'm going to have him on more throughout the season, however that may look. Yeah, it's going to be a regular feature. I reckon, what do you reckon, every 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe once a month?
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll get him on. As his stock rises, we are grabbing onto those coattails of his, and we are flying first class straight to South Africa with the boys, or just the rugby pod.
And the new regime at Gloucester got off to a good start, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, and obviously one of Jim's previous clubs. Listen, going away to Worcester, and they were in a bit of a fight to start off with, and then massive game changer. Nanai, not only once but twice. First of all, throws a shoulder at Johnny May. Johnny May's down. He bounces back into the defensive line and does the same again. I can't remember who he does it to the second time, but what's he tackling like that for? Just chucking shoulders around. I mean, he was obviously excited to be back on the field, and he's not the biggest bloke ever, but he was trying to throw his 62 kilos around and caught the old Johnny May.
Mate, the poor chicken, mate. The poor chicken. You don't want to joke about stuff like that, but he's on the floor pecking seeds. I mean, poor lad. The poor lad. That's genuinely what you think, don't you? Because, again, with everything that's happened, right, in the last couple of years around referees' decisions, players taking other players out of the air, these high shots which all kind of stem from Will Spencer's one for Leicester, do you remember last year? Yeah. We're debating about it. We've got to a point now, right, where it's hard enough to referee games and it's hard enough to watch games where players have been sent off. You're watching that, and I've given away some stupid penalties in my life. I ain't given away a penalty or put my team in a situation off the back of doing something that ridiculous. We can't hide away from it. That was absolutely ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
You said it. What is he doing?
Yeah.
You go down to 14 men. Mate, how good at Gloucester, we don't know.
Yeah.
Worcester 14 men.
Yeah, and actually Worcester looked very good to start off with until Nanai got sent off. And, Sips then pulled the strings. You're playing against 14 men, especially in the backs. If you lose a forward to a red card, it's a lot easier as a team, to compensate for that. When you lose a back, you've got set piece plays, scrum plays, whatever, manipulating the back three. There's a lot more space out there. So, Sips played well at 10. He needed to after the changes that he's made at the club. Alex King is just arriving there this week, so he'll add big impetus as well in terms of the attack. But yeah, you just don't know where Gloucester are at. We don't know where any team's at, to be fair. But they, did a good job. Gone down to 6 ways, bonus point victory.
A tough place for them normally to go.
Yeah. Good start for George Skivington. Interesting start for Worcester, obviously, and even more interesting. I might come on to it later. Donkey Weir's hair. He looked like Screech. I mean, we speak to John Cooney about how good looking he is now, his hair, and then you've got the flip side of it. Donkey Weir, me old Screech. What from Saved by the Bell? What are you thinking?
At what point did you look at yourself in the mirror before you're about to walk out, say to yourself, I am ready, without laughing and thinking, my God, what do I look like?
When I wake up in the morning and I can't remember the words to Saved by the Bell, actually, but I used to love that programme. But yeah, bizarre from Donkey Weir. Maybe it was a bet. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Must have been a bet.
But yeah, Gloucester on good form.
Bristol kept their good form as well, didn't they? But Sarries ran them pretty close.
Bristol's.
Again, gutted by the match. It weren't great, was it? It weren't a classic. Pat Lam said it was kind of always going to be that way. He apologised to his family before the match because he knew it was going to be a bit of a kicking fest. Radrandra, we never got to see him. We got to see him after the game. Did you see him with a shirt off in the change room when they were singing?
I mean, how big?
Mate, he's got like a 10-pack.
Yeah.
Absolute goodness me. So I paused that when I saw Bristol post that video up online.
Did you show back?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because I have this thing, it's like with Tom Evans, for example. If we see it, I just say he's on steroids. If he looks that good. I'm like, that ain't natural. You want me to take steroids, I'll look like that. So that's my justification.
We're not condoning taking steroids on this show.
Of course. Like Saracens had some good players playing. They had Marrow playing. So they had some proper players. Wigglesworth played well, did what he did with the kick in. Bristol, good at scrum. My mate, Alistair Dickinson, Dicko, texts him after and says, mate, tell the scrums that. He says, well, when you've got players like John Afoa, Carl Sinclair, I know he came on, he actually got pinged a couple of times at the scrum. It's slightly easier, but I thought Saracens could have won that game, I'll be honest. Not just because I'm a fan and because I used to play there. Bristol, quality team. But again, going back to it, I mean, what a shite game. We have to be honest.
Yeah.
How great was it?
No, a lot of it was to do with the weather. Let's not beat around Jim's bush. The weather, it was tipping down with rain. So, and you're playing against the Saracens team that play a specific brand of rugby.
Of course.
And you know, against Saracens, you're going to be risk averse. The difference for me was it was good to see Bristol nut out of a tough victory. So it's not all about the Randrandras, the Piatows, all these boys. It's actually the nuts and bolts of winning a tough game against a top team. And the other difference was back in the day when Saracens, and I hate to bring it back up again, but I will, when they were breaking the salary cap, they could empty a bench of having, George Cruz, Skelton, all these big names come off the bench. They haven't got that anymore, have they? So they haven't got those massive people that can come in, world-class stars to win a game that they were banging contention of winning anyway. So it's a leveller. Was it a penalty try? Jamie George, 100%
Yes.
It was for me.
Well, yeah,
there was an argument on the other end. Should it have been a penalty try to Saracens to win the game at the death as well? But, I agreed that was just a penalty and a yellow card, not a penalty try.
The big thing about Bristol, and you mentioned it there, was like digging out a win, was actually, I mentioned it just briefly just then about the scrum, was their set piece. Obviously, the try that won them the game, Jamie George, the one that you just mentioned there, got sin-binned. The fact that Saracens had a line out in the last minute of the game to potentially try and drive over and win. Luatua gets up, I think, or Vui gets up in the air and turns it over off Marrow. These are the things, right, for Bristol, which will make them a top 4, top European side and to win trophies, right? You look out the back, Piatow in the centre, my goodness me, can that man tackle a man? Did you see him? Absolutely smoking Billy.
Yeah.
The kickoffs and stuff like that. You've got Piatow at 15. We all know about him, his brother, Charles Piatow, multimillionaire. And we spoke about Randrandra as well. The big thing, again, was set piece. So, and regardless of who Saracens want to bring on off the bench, look who they started with. Mako Vunipola, Jamie George, Vincent Koch, Maru Itoje, Callum Hunter-Hill in the mixer there as well. And then you look at Bristol, the team that they started with, and you're actually thinking, I can see it now. Like, without us jumping on the bandwagon of Randrandra and Piatow, look at the scrum with the Foa, who's just signed a long-term deal. Then you bring on Sinclair. Then you bring on Harry Thacker. They're a quality team, mate. Yeah. So, albeit the game weren't great, and there's a load of penalties in the weather or whatever, once it gets going properly and the sun comes out, oh my Bristols is all I'm saying.
Jim, you mentioned before about Wasps. Do you still think they're not a top 4 side?
Yeah, go on, James. Go on, James.
Under Di Young, I couldn't see it. Under Di Young, I couldn't see it. The difference with Wasps, you tell what you think in kind of 1 or 2 words, Goody. What you think the difference is, I'll give you my expert opinion.
Well, I think it's probably belief, really, a lot of it. They've always had that ability to be clinical and attack sharply. You saw the first try from Josh Bassett. And it's a confidence thing. It's a free-flowing energy. You look at the back row.
Hang on. So when I said 2 words, that's what I wanted you to say.
Oh,
I
okay.
wanted you to say back row, because I'll give my superficial opinion. I know you're about to give a long-winded one there because you're more passionate about it. That back row, Thomas Young is a phenomenon.
Ridiculous player.
Mate,
I've said it for years.
Mate, he is so good. He doesn't look like he should be that good, but he is so good. And Jack, every time I say Jack Willis, I think I think of Wilson from Castaway. I don't know why. Maybe it looks like the ball. He is ridiculous, right?
Well, imagine him. So let's talk about Jack Willis. Semi-final, and I don't know whether you played in it, Jim, or you were still at Saracens. The semi-final a few years back at Allianz Park, he ruptures pretty much everything in his knee. Right, Farrell, I think he just got his knee planted. It was ugly as anything. He was supposed to go on the England tour to South Africa, I think it was, that summer, ruptures his knee. He's come back. The positions he gets himself in, with having literally had his knee snapped off a few years back and winning turnovers where he's actually supporting his own body weight, he's redonkulous.
Yeah.
And people talk about that there was big things at the weekend about after his performance, should he be in the England squad as he misses opportunity? He's young as anything. And the fact is, there's Curry, there's Underhill. We've got a plethora of unbelievable fetchers, open side, 6s/7s or 7s/6s. He's one of them. He's ridiculously good. And the new interpretation of the breakdown laws suit Thomas Young and Jack Willis beyond belief. So it's a good start for us. We're in the top 4. Jim, you thought we were going to be relegated or something like that. Your team's got relegated. Oggy. Wasps. Decent.
Thanks, Gertie. Thanks, Jim, and thank you very much for listening as well. Don't forget to hit subscribe on whatever platform you get your podcasts on, and check us out on YouTube as well.
Rugby Pod.
Pod.